Hello, my name is Zach Prax. I am a speech and debate coach and a social studies teacher at Eastview High School in Apple Valley, Minnesota. You are about to watch a public forum debate round on the February 2023 topic, Resolved in the United States, right to work laws do more harm than good. Especially given the national level news regarding whether or not employees should be compelled to join labor unions, this is a very interesting classroom discussion for the social studies classroom. In the first two speeches, you will hear a debater from each team give what's called their constructive speech, their first initial advocacy where they get to establish their position on the topic. The pro-debaters, who will be speaking first, will establish that right-to-work laws do more harm than good. They'll be outlining why labor unions are important and why membership should be compelled. The con-debaters, who will go second, will outline the converse, why they believe right-to-work laws and giving choice for labor union membership is important for the United States. In the constructive, you will hear each debater issue an advocacy, a thesis-driven position as to why their side is correct. And there are many important implications for literacy and the social studies classroom. For instance, you will hear important uses of evidence and research that's been compiled in order to give more ethos or authority to the debate. You will also hear the use of statistical analysis and empirical examples that try to demonstrate support for their side. And finally, you will hear the nuances of higher levels of argumentation. In addition to a thesis and framing the debate around core issues, you'll hear taglines or claims. You'll hear warrant or the thorough explanations. And finally, you'll hear the use of impacts, why the arguments that are being given have importance in the real world.
All right, gonna start in 3, 2, 1. My partner and I urge an act ballot for the resolution of Resolved. In the United States, right-to-work laws do more harm than good. Under the Way mechanism of cost-benefit analysis, it is imperative that the most important impacts are those that pertain to the workers' quality of life and productivity. Contention 1, harmful effects of right-to-work laws. Right-to-work laws are detrimental to unions, workplaces, and employees. To quote Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., in our glorious fight for civil rights, we must guard against being fooled by false slogans, such as right to work, as they allow to rob us of our civil rights and job rights. Its purpose is to destroy labor unions and collective bargaining. End quote. Now, according to Insider Inc., right to work sounds like a robust worker protection law, when in reality, it's the exact opposite. It would give employers more money and power at the expense of workers. And right to work laws interfere with the ability of unions to collect dues from workers who enjoy union protections. And states have passed right to work laws as a way to save workers money, but really they starve unions of funds, power, and bargaining capabilities. The same unions who have successfully gotten the workers better pay, adequate breaks, and safe hours. If you're a worker in a right to work state, not only do you make about $1,600 less a year than workers in non-right to work states, but you have less employer-provided health insurance and significantly lower retirement plans and pension plans. It's a pure, clear benefit for corporations at the expense of workers. This is further proven by the National Bureau of Economic Research, which found a difference in nearly 20% of the unionization rate between states with and without right to work laws. Right to work laws are also associated with 7.5% lower wages. And the American Federation of Labor and Congress of Industrial Organizations also brings up how in right to work states, only 24% of the jobs were in low-wage occupations, compared to 24% of the jobs were in low-wage occupations, compared to only 14.5% of jobs in other states without right to work laws. And the average number of discrimination charges that the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission receives is 36% higher in right to work states. A recent report surveying the construction industry published by the Illinois Economic Policy Institute also found that union work sites are 19% less likely to have an OSHA violation and had 34% fewer violations per OSHA inspection than non-union work sites. Despite our best efforts, there will always be some workplace accidents and deaths, but all of us, employers, unions, workers, and the government, need to fully recommit ourselves to fully reducing the number of those occurrences possible and to eliminating preventable injuries and deaths entirely. A safe workplace should be ingrained in all of us, and something we think about as a matter of course each day. And union representation is one crucial step in that direction. Impact. Right to work laws impact workers by decreasing the unionization rate, reducing worker benefits, and resulting in lower wages and more dangerous workplaces. Potential 2, importance of unions. Right to work laws harm unions, an integral and necessary part of a healthy workplace. First, according to the U.S. Department of Labor, labor unions improve wages and working conditions for all workers, help reduce wage gaps for women workers and workers of color, and union members have better job security protection and better paid leave than non-union workers, and are more secure in exercising their rights in the workplace. In addition to this, workers with union representation enjoy a significant pay premium compared to non-union workers. As reported by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, non-union workers earn just 83% of what unionized workers earn, and when union density declines, so do workers' wages. A report by the Economic Policy Institute found that a decline in unionization has cost a typical worker $3,250 in lost earnings per year, which is almost half of the monthly salary of workers in America. They also found that on average, the 17 U.S. states with the highest union densities have state minimum wages that are, on average, 19% higher than the national average and 40% higher than those in low union density states. They also have median annual income $6,000 higher than the national average and have higher than average unemployment insurance recipiency rates. Also, states with the highest union densities have an uninsured population 4.5 percentage points lower on average than that of low union density states, and have all elected to expand Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, and are more likely to have passed paid sick leave laws and paid family and medical leave laws than states with lower union densities. Impact. Unions result in better benefits, representation, and pay for workers, and right to work laws are detrimental to their effects. Right to work laws are targeting workers under the facade of false slogans, which results in workers suffering from more dangerous working conditions, less pay and benefits, and even more occupational deaths. For these reasons, we urge an act. Thank you.
Okay, is everyone ready?
Mm-hmm.
Ishtan and I are proud to negate the resolution resolved in the United States, right to work laws do more harm than good. According to Britannica 23, a right to work law is any state law forbidding union security measures under which workers are required to join a union. Contention 1 is manufacturing. Because right to work laws signal a more stable business climate, manufacturing companies are much more likely to invest in right to work states. Kim 18 finds that the implementation of right to work policy signals lower labor costs, as well as a business-friendly climate which can gain the favor of foreign businesses looking to operate efficiently, resulting in greater incoming investment. By signaling a business-friendly climate, manufacturing firms and other businesses flock to right to work states. According to Shannon 14, right to work laws attract more new businesses than states without such laws. Employers value the labor management predictability inherent in stable right to work states. Right to work laws ensure companies and workers will enjoy labor peace over the long term. In fact, because of its stability, Shannon 14 finds that 50% of manufacturers automatically screen out any non-right to work state. Along with their economic prospects and tax dollars for the region, these businesses bring back high-quality jobs primarily in the manufacturing sector. Austin and Lilly 21 found that the manufacturing share of employment is 28% higher on the right to work side of the policy border. This is consistent with the prediction that right to work laws reduce production costs for firms in union exposed industries. The impact is twofold. First, an increase in economic growth and employment through the multiplier effect in regards to manufacturing. Quill Act 21 finds that manufacturing jobs have a multiplier effect due to wages being respent in other parts of the local economy. Middle-class wage earners help local businesses and restaurants by buying houses and cars, eating out, and spending on other durable goods. This means that when we invest in the middle class through right to work, any money beyond their basic needs flows directly back into the economy, fueling all-around growth for local communities. The increased spending into the middle class creates economic growth in two ways: decreased unemployment and reduced poverty. First, unemployment. Bistarcky 22 found that every manufacturing job spurs 7 to 12 new jobs in other related industries, helping to build and sustain our economy. In regards to reduced poverty, Austin and Lilly 21 find that through the multiplier effect, right to work reduces unemployment by 0.4 percentage points. Furthermore, right to work reduces the share of individuals below the federal poverty line by 1.4 percentage points, with a 2.3% reduction in childhood poverty. This goes much further than just the immediate effects of poverty alleviation. This means increased access to food, education, and employment opportunities for generations down the line. Second, manufacturing is increasingly becoming an asset to rural economies, creating new developments that can spur a revival of their prosperity. The Aspen Institute 17 found that as rural America's second largest sector, manufacturing employs 14% of rural employees and produces 15% of total rural earnings. Rural manufacturing is on the upswing. This growth in rural manufacturing is because, according to Low 21, rural areas generally have lower wages, property taxes, and land prices, making these areas more attractive to manufacturing. Because right to work boosts manufacturing overall, this is critical to revitalizing America's currently stagnant rural communities. The Aspen Institute 17 continues that manufacturing and its higher quality jobs can stabilize and become a driver in rural regions. Rural manufacturers find it in their self-interest to invest in their workers and community revitalization. By doing this, rural manufacturing creates stable long-term economic growth for local communities across America. That's why Low 21 finds that rural plants have a higher survival rate than urban plants. All else being equal, plants in urban counties were 23% less likely to survive than plants in rural counties. This means that manufacturing in rural areas is more likely to produce sustainable economic impacts. When manufacturers move into these rural areas, Rebuttal 22 reports that since manufacturing jobs pay above the average wage in rural areas, employment growth in the sector benefits rural economies overall. People living in these rural communities are paid more, leading to an increased disposable income, which leads to higher quality of life and contributes to the multiplier effect. In turn, according to Aldrich 97, the estimated effect of right-to-work laws was a 5.2% increase in rural earnings growth. Because of this, on a cost-benefit analysis, right-to-work laws do far more good than harm. For all these reasons and more, we strongly negate.
At this point in the debate, there has not been any interaction between the arguments yet. The constructives are pre-prepared speeches, and there will be responses that come later, but for now, we've just been given a glimpse of each position's advocacy. In terms of the debate, you have heard both sides make reference to a cost-benefit analysis. We call that a framework argument, a big-picture glimpse as to what the judge should be preferring to use in their decision-making when they decide the ultimate winner of the round. And in the cost-benefit analysis, each side admits that there are strengths and weaknesses to each position. However, the one with more benefits than harms is the side that should win. I'm hearing some good use of evidence from both teams. For instance, the pro team has some really good research from the National Bureau of Economic Research that has statistical analysis showing that in general, right-to-work states have lower wages and lower rates of unionization. Meanwhile, I found the negatives argument from the camp card. A card is a piece of evidence that establishes that in a lot of cases, businesses will flock to right-to-work states, and that will create greater economic opportunities overall. The next speech we are going to watch is actually not a speech, it's called cross-examination. It's a point in the debate that allows for direct discourse between the two different sides in the form of asking questions and giving answers. The purpose of cross-examination is twofold. First, it's used to clarify key issues that might have been missed in the round. And two, it's used to find weaknesses in the opposition, to try to get ideas for what different arguments and responses could be made. In this cross-examination, the first two debaters that just gave the constructives will have 3 minutes to ask questions and give answers to each other.
Ready for cross?
Mm-hmm. And since I spoke first, do you mind if I get the first question?
Go ahead.
All right. I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. So you said right-to-work laws decrease labor costs, correct?
Yes.
Are you aware that the definition of labor costs is the sum of all wages paid to employees?
Yeah, well, are you talking about this in regards to our whole thing about the business-friendly climate and our first contention?
I believe so, because I think you state that because of right-to-work laws, you see a decrease in labor costs.
Yeah, so when we're talking about a business-friendly climate, we can look to Austin and Lilly 21, which states that right-to-work laws make locations more attractive for business investment, not only because of lower labor costs, but because there's faster growth in income and total employment in right-to-work states. So it's not only because of the lower labor costs.
Okay.
Okay, can I have a question?
Mm-hmm.
So, on your NBER card, you state that there's a 20% difference in unionization rates in right-to-work and non-right-to-work states. Mm-hmm. So does that difference account for other outside factors like cost of living and political decisions and geographical location?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, you can have a question.
All right, so those new jobs that you talk about, are all of them in the U.S.?
That's what our cards talk about, so yeah, I would assume that they're all in the U.S.
Okay.
Okay, so you talk about this whole thing with, okay, now, is unionization going down in both right-to-work and non-right-to-work states?
Well, so we don't know that for a fact, but we do show that in right-to-work states, you see that drastic decrease in unionization, which shows that the right-to-work laws do hurt the unions.
Okay, you can have a question.
So, do you have any direct examples of manufacturing companies expanding specifically due to right-to-work laws?
Do you mean like in rural areas? Because we give you multiple cards, like the Aspen Institute, Low 21, and yeah, Low 21 continues with examples of manufacturing companies investing in rural areas. So.
But did they state they moved specifically due to the right-to-work laws?
Well, yeah, we have cards that specifically link right-to-work laws in manufacturing in rural areas. Can I have a question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you talk about how there's 7% lower wages in right-to-work states. So again, does that card really account for other differences like cost of living?
So I believe it does account for cost of living. However, it, once again just shows that these right to work laws result in the lower wages, which happen in the right to work states versus the non-right to work states.
Okay, you can have a question.
Okay, so how do right to work laws directly reduce poverty?
Yeah, so that's basically our impact on our first contention. So the first thing that we're talking about is decreased unemployment, because we show you through the multiplier effect with Starkey 22 that each manufacturing job spurs 7 to 12 new jobs in other parts of the economy. And then our second thing is through decreased poverty, because we show you that when we're going to invest in the middle class through right to work laws, any money beyond their basic needs is going to flow directly back into the economy, which is essentially, like we state, fueling all around growth for local communities overall. And that's time.
This cross-examination highlighted one of the most important aspects of a modern-day social studies education in the form of emphasizing critical literacy. In this cross-examination, we witnessed the debaters questioning assumptions that were made and scrutinizing evidence that was given rather than just taking it at face value. For instance, I thought it was a very smart strategy of the negative to question the National Bureau of Economic Research evidence that was provided by the affirmative. The debater asked if there were any other variables that were included, any other factors that could have contributed to lower wages, and the affirmative side admitted that yes, there were some other factors. So again, even though the evidence was true and was factually relevant, the assumptions being made were questioned, and that's a really, really important skill for social studies learners to understand. The next speech that we are going to watch are going to be the rebuttal speeches. This will be the first time in the debate where there's a formalized speech that's given to oppose the other side's analysis. We'll first hear the affirmative respond and create refutation arguments against the negative position, and then the negative will do the same thing against the affirmative. Sometimes there is some defense of your original case position, but the largest focus of these two speeches will be to generate clash and to try to take down the other debaters' positions.
Okay. Is everybody ready for my rebuttal? Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me start my formative timer here in 3, 2, 1. For today's framework, it is imperative that, as my partner stated, it be weighed upon the weighing mechanism that's inherent in the resolution, that being cost-benefit analysis. The most important benefits being today those that pertain to the worker's quality of life and productivity, because ultimately, that's what the ultimate goal of right-to-work laws are there to protect, which is exactly why we outweigh on this weighing mechanism of quality of life under today's resolution. So let's begin by addressing my opponent's first contention, where they discuss how manufacturing is flocking to right-to-work states, and they themselves state why this is, because they state in case, they say that labor costs are going down and how manufacturers see that as appealing. Why that is? Because as Paul Constant of Investopedia states, the cost of labor is the sum of all wages paid to employees, as well as the cost of employee benefits and payroll taxes paid by an employer. So here we can see that the reason these manufacturing companies are being drawn to these right-to-work states is specifically because they know that they can get away with paying their workers less and paying out less benefits to them. This is a clear example of one of the direct harms of right-to-work laws, and they themselves mention it in case. Because ultimately we see that these jobs, these employers, are preying upon the workers who are vital to the economy. So you can pull that right to our side because it's just another example of how detrimental it can be, especially to the local rural worker that they claim to help. They also talk about how manufacturing, even if that's the case, they talk about how manufacturers are being drawn to it for other reasons as well. However, to quote Gold and Kimball of the Economic Policy Institute, the North American Vice President for site location for Toyota reported that right-to-work laws had no effect one way or another on Toyota's choice to build a plant in Mississippi and another in Texas. Furthermore, in the first year after adopting right-to-work laws, the state of Indiana was not able to identify a single company that stated it had moved to Indiana because of right-to-work laws and would not have done so without the law. So we can see that while my opponents might not be able to provide any clear-cut specific examples of this happening, we provide several examples to the alternative. We can see how ultimately we aren't seeing these real effects. Employers aren't actually saying that that's the reason why, and states aren't seeing any real effect because of this. So you can really just kind of drop that entire impact. But even if you don't, we still have the fact that they're preying upon the workers. Also, they try and cite off an impact about how they're reducing poverty because of increased spending. But people are going to be spending money anyway. They talk about how any money past what they're already getting is going into the economy, but even if they're spending money on their base needs, that money is still going into local economy. Whether it's spent on groceries, at a local doctor in these rural communities they're talking about, in the rural communities, this money is cyclical. It stays within the smaller economy for the most part. And ultimately what they're trying to sell you on their impact is when people have more money, they spend more money, and that's really the extent of their impact. It does not weigh on workers' quality of life, safety, and even increase mortality rates. To quote Michael Zurab, we can see that a direct effect of right-to-work laws and unionization has led to an astounding 14.2% increase in occupational mortality rates. We can see that right-to-work laws are having a direct harm on workers' lives, safety, quality of life as a whole, and that is why we outweigh on today's debate. We also talk about how there's rural economy growth, but once more, it cannot outweigh under the weighing mechanism quality of life. When, as my partner has stated in case, we have cited reason, example after example, of how right-to-work laws are detrimental to these very economies my opponents claim to help. Because right-to-work, the reason for this is that right-to-work laws are hurting unions. We can see this from the National Labor Relations Board, where they saw a 20% decrease, or specifically in the example of Kentucky, where their when in 2016, their unionization rate was 11.1%. However, immediately after passing the right-to-work law, it dropped to 9.6%. A drastic difference from the national average, which continued to stay relatively high. Right-to-work laws are detrimental to unions, the local worker, and overall these economies that my opponent's case are claiming to benefit. That is why we urge AFT for the quality of life of the average worker. Thank you.
Is everyone ready? Okay, as an off-time roadmap, I'm going to be going down the framework, then on to the opponent's case, and back to our case at the end. Time is going to start on my first word. Okay, so starting off with framework, you should vote for whoever helps the middle class the most because they're the largest class by scope and they're the foundation of our economy. Furthermore, when we invest in the middle class through right to work, any money beyond their basic needs flows directly back into the economy, fueling all-around growth for local communities, which helps worker quality of life as well. So now going to their first contention about the harmful effects of unions, Judge, the opponent's entire case rests on the assumption that unionization goes down in right to work states. However, O'Grady 16 finds that there's no correlation across Western countries. For example, Germany is commonly regarded as having some of the most powerful unions in Europe, yet right to work is in the German constitution. The app actually has it backwards. They tell you that their studies account for external factors, but their evidence from the National Bureau of Economic Research just examines state-by-state evidence, but ignores extraneous factors that could play into the evidence. In reality, right to work laws have no direct impact on unions and are usually only adopted in states where unions decline from natural economic transition. As Schnabel 2 finds, although on average these right-to-work states have lower levels of union density, multivariate analyses indicate that right-to-work laws have little direct impact on union membership because right-to-work laws represent more symbol than substance, including the possibility of reverse causality. This means that unionization is already going down in right-to-work states due to economic transition, not because of right-to-work. This is critical because the app's own evidence that claims a 20% decrease in unions finds that all of the impacts that the app reads, quote, rest on the assumption that without right-to-work laws, states would have the same relative distribution of unionization and wages across industries. This is simply not true, and because of this, it takes out all of their impacts on wages, benefits, and union strength. Furthermore, let's just take a step back. Unionization is going down in the status quo across the nation, even in non-right-to-work states. So clearly, right-to-work cannot be linked directly to union decline. The act tells you that unions are good for wages and worker safety, and we agree, because not only is right-to-work not the cause of union decline, right-to-work actually helps unions. Right-to-work isn't too hard on unions, but it's also not too soft. By making unions actually prove their worth to their workers, because member dues aren't guaranteed, right-to-work improves union effectiveness. In fact, it prevents their decline, as Zula 21 concludes worker-initiated due certification petitions experience a 38% decline following right-to-work. Because right-to-work doesn't harm unionization, you can disregard all of their impact in both their first and second contentions. Even if you don't buy this, the empirical evidence doesn't lie. Their evidence only examines the benefits of unions, but it doesn't actually look into the specific impact of right-to-work laws. In a border kind of analysis, Austin Lilly 21 writes that our research does not detect meaningful differences in health insurance coverage rates. Prefer this evidence because it eliminates external factors compared to their general evidence that doesn't account for that. Next, they tell you that wages declined by 7%, and they say that they account for these external factors, but Judge, the study is just a state-by-state analysis. What they don't account for is lower wages are actually offset by a lower cost of living in right-to-work states. According to Shannon 14, right-to-work states generally have a significantly lower cost of living, which means that workers in right-to-work states actually enjoy higher spendable income. Even if you don't buy this, Chun 21 finds that because right-to-work incentivizes effective bargaining, right-to-work increases union wages by 5%. Furthermore, we tell you that on their safety violations impact, empirics prove otherwise because Macrodus 19 writes that my results are consistent with literature that found that right-to-work laws do not lead to an increased increased labor law violations. So now going back to our case with manufacturing, they say we can't give you any examples, but let's look locally. In Osceola, just 50 miles south of us, according to Herald Ball 21, following right to work, Clark County's manufacturing industry has advantages not found in bigger cities across the state. Factors like job security and unique diverse opportunities drive the entire community. Manufacturers are investing because they are attracted to stability, not exploiting workers like the opponents say. Because of this, you look to the Starkey 22, which found that every manufacturing job spurs 7 to 12 new jobs in other industries, which Austin and Lilly 21 tells you reduces poverty by 1.4 percentage points and improves rural earnings by 5.2%. Because of this, we urge a negative ballot.
After the rebuttals, we're now getting a clear sense of the direction that the debate might be going in. Just like before, you once again hear both sides giving a very clear, very specific criteria in which they believe the judge should vote on. The affirmative believes that the judge should consider first and foremost a cost-benefit analysis involving the worker's quality of life as well as productivity. The negative, or the con, believes that it's whichever team best helps the middle class. And in doing so, both are establishing a clear thesis-driven position that they're trying to use to communicate their side. Overall, in debate, one of the best applications to the social studies standards that we teach is the idea of this thesis-driven analysis. In terms of the responses, both sides are doing some very smart argumentation. For instance, within the pro-rebuttal, we hear lots of analysis that's being established that maybe the economy is being helped out, but it's because of worker exploitation. It's the workers who are losing wages, who are losing healthcare benefits, all because of decreasing unionization rates, and that's creating this false idea of wellness that the negative is trying to instill. I thought that was a really good argument, and I would not be surprised if that becomes a focal point later on in the debate. Meanwhile, the negative is also doing some smart analysis. For instance, they have some analysis from O'Grady, an author who's an expert in right-to-work laws, that's establishing that there's no correlation between right-to-work laws and union membership. There's all kinds of other factors involved with it. The other thing that the negative does that I think is a high point of the critical literacy of debate, they're not saying that labor unions are bad. In fact, the negative student giving the rebuttal says that labor unions actually can be good. But the problem is that without right-to-work laws, when folks are compelled to join those labor unions, the labor unions don't have to work hard to provide any type of benefit. So the argument is that right-to-work laws can help make labor unions even stronger. To me, that's the point of debate and social studies discourse, is that there's two completely conflicting narratives. However, this debater has chosen to find some ways to develop common ground on how this side can get the most amount of benefit in the debate. The very next part of this debate is going to be another cross-examination. This will be between the two students that just gave the rebuttal, and just like the first cross-examination, the primary objectives are to clarify the issues that have been spoken in the round, and then to find different weaknesses in the opponent's argumentation.
Ready for cross?
Yes. Perfect. I'm going to start this 3-minute timer here in a moment. Are you okay if we get the first question? Right.
Yep.
Perfect. I'm going to start this 3-minute timer here in 3, 2, 1. So you talked about how unionization rates are already going down in the status quo. Do you have any statistics on that?
Yeah, so actually unionization rates went down from 10.3% in 2021 to 10.1% in 2022, and that was a nationwide analysis.
Mm-hmm. And what was the source on that?
The source was Bureau of Labor Statistics.gov. Can I have a question?
Yeah.
So, is this evidence that non-union workers make less money? Is that coming directly from the impacts of right to work specifically, or is it just talking about the effect of decreased unionization?
Well, ultimately what we can see is right to work laws on balance are specifically designed to hurt unions because like you said in your framework, that's what right to work laws are there to do. They, allow people to not be in the union. The entire goal is to hurt unions, and so that's what we see happening. It reduces the benefits provided.
But just to clarify, the evidence is specifically relating to decreased unionization and not right to work, correct?
I mean, specifically, yes, but we see right to work laws having that effect. We back up multiple sources.
You have a question.
Yeah, thanks. So you talk about how, just one moment here. So you talk about how Germany is a perfect example of this. Wouldn't you agree that Germany has a different economic and political climate than the United States?
I would agree that Germany has a different economic and political climate, but we're just showing you a good example of a Western country that has mostly similar structure to the United States, but then we also give you a D-link of this and how we show you that right to work laws are not the cause of decreased unionization because of the simple fact that unionization was already declining before right to work laws went into place. Can I have a question?
Yeah.
Okay, so you talk about an increase in worker discrimination. Where are we seeing these impacts actually come to fruition?
Well, we can see that unions provide more equality in the workplace, that provide more people, unions provide, on balance, more opportunities to speak out against this before it can occur and provide more opportunities for equality and more, training to prevent it from happening. And so once more, we see the fruition of right to work laws hurting unionization.
Can I have a follow-up?
Mm-hmm.
So once again, we're falling into this thing where we're attributing it to unionization. Do you have specific cards attributing it to right to work laws, increased discrimination?
I mean, we don't have to because, again, if we see right to work laws hurting unions and unions prevent this from happening, then right to work laws through this link chain are harming this and making this a worse issue because they're taking away the defense against it.
Okay, you have a question.
Perfect. So, your source from Bistarchy 21, you talk about how it leads to 7 to 12 jobs in a different industry. Are these also in the United States rural communities, or are these also elsewhere outsourced to other countries?
No, so this is talking about in the United States, we're creating 7 to 12 jobs in other sectors because workers are reinvesting their extra wages into the economy from their manufacturing jobs, and that spurs all around economic growth. And that's time.
Mm-hmm.
With the conclusion of the second cross-examination, the debate is now going to start focusing on the most major issues of the round. And the job of the two debaters in the next speech, called the summary, is to make sure that it can go down to what's truly the most important issues. In this next speech, the debater's primary job is to focus on defending or answering the most important arguments and to start to paint a picture for the judge exactly how they should be evaluated. Because the time for the speech is much less than the rebuttals or the constructives, debaters should expressly not be trying to answer every single argument that was made during the rebuttal. Rather, they will need to concisely and quickly decide which issues are the most important and how they are going to attack them.
All right, ready in 3, 2, 1. This round needs to be evaluated on cost benefits, of which quality of life is a key aspect. Now, our opponents state that right to work laws reduce poverty by spurring manufacturing jobs. However, according to the Economic Policy Institute, there has been no research showing a causal relationship between right to work status and attracting manufacturing jobs. And the North American Vice President for site location for Toyota reported that right to work had no effect one way or the other on Toyota's choice to build a plant in Mississippi and another in Texas. And furthermore, in the first year of adopting right to work laws, the state of Indiana was not able to identify a single company that stated it moved to Indiana specifically because of right to work laws and would not have done so without the law. Also, as my partner has already stated, these right to work laws are resulting in lower labor costs, aka the cost of labor is the sum of all wages paid to employees, as well as the cost of employee benefits, which is backed up by Investopedia and the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. Also, they use Germany as an example. However, the resolution specifically pertains to the effects of right to work laws in the US, which is completely ignoring that Germany and the US have vastly different political climates. And they also say that unions are just decreasing nationwide. However, in Kentucky, unions decreased immediately after right to work laws took effect, which clearly shows that these laws are hurting unions. Now, moving on to our first contention, it continues to stand strong. And there's a difference of nearly 20% in the unionization rate between states with and without right to work laws, which once again shows that these laws are hurting union growth. And also, this is in addition to the fact that in right to work states, 24% of the jobs were in low wage occupations, compared to only 14.5% of jobs in states without right to work laws. And the and 14.5% and the workers in those states make $1,600 less a year in addition to less benefits. And the average number of discrimination charges that the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission receives is 36% higher in right to work states. And also, the Illinois Economic Policy Institute found that union work sites are 19% less likely to have an OSHA violation and have 34% fewer violations per OSHA inspection. Now, to quote Michael Zurab, in total, right to work laws have led to a 14.2 increase in occupational mortality through decreased unionization. End quote. A safe workplace needs to be ingrained in all of us, and union representation is a crucial step in that direction. Now, moving on to our second contention, it has also remained unchallenged. Union states have median annual income $6,000 higher than the national average, and non-union workers earn just 83% of what unionized workers earn. Also, states with the highest union densities have, on average, an uninsured population 4.5 percentage points lower on average than that of low union density states. Now, these two contentions clearly answer the resolution, as unions have proven to provide an abundance of monetary benefits for their workers, and right to work laws are targeting and manipulating workers under the false promise of benefits, which in turn results in thousands of dollars being lost and more dangerous working conditions and deaths. The only clean way to vote here is in regards to worker safety and monetary benefits, and we outweigh on both. For these reasons, we urge you to vote aye. Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna start a running clock on prep time. Okay, stopping prep. Is everyone ready for me to begin summary? Okay, then time to start my first word. My opponent's whole case hinges on the fact that unionization goes down directly because of right-to-work policy. Let's go over why this is inherently false. Right-to-work laws are adopted in states where unions are already going down. Union membership is declining in both right-to-work and non-right-to-work states, which means that right-to-work laws are not the sole cause of declining union membership, which means they can't really access their impacts here. Schnabel 02 finds that most analysis indicate that right-to-work laws have little direct impact on union membership. They keep saying that unionization rates are lower in right-to-work states, but judges, those rates were already lower before their implementation. Also, their own evidence contradicts themselves. NBER 22, which they read in case, finds that all of the impacts of the act reads, quote, rest on the assumption that without right-to-work laws, all states would have the same relative distribution of unionization and wages across industries. This is simply not true, and because of this, it takes out their impacts on wages, benefits, and union strength. Clearly, right-to-work is not the reason for union decline. Let's go to their point on 7% lower wages and how right-to-work workers earn 83% of what non-right-to-work workers do. Let's do some analysis here. Right-to-work policies are normally implemented in states with Republican-leaning politics. Most Republican policies advocate for a lower minimum wage. Of course, there's going to be a decreased wages in right-to-work states. However, the decreased wages are not coming from right-to-work. They're coming from these policies. Furthermore, these lower wages are actually offset by the overall lower cost of living in right-to-work states. Shannon 14 states that right-to-work states generally have a significantly lower cost of living, so lower wages are offset by the lower cost of living. Furthermore, Collins 12 explains that these wage disparities are not because of right-to-work, but instead because right-to-work laws often exist alongside other, perhaps more compelling, pro-business policies that actually cause this. Even if you don't buy this, Chen 21 finds that right-to-work legislation actually increases union wages by 5%, which is suggestive of a change in union bargaining behavior. Their evidence doesn't account for any of these differences, whereas ours does. If right-to-work has any impact on wages, it actually leads to an increase in union wages, which directly contradicts their points. They dropped inequality in summary, but even so, according to Lucy 15, right-to-work states are doing a better job of providing opportunities for minorities, and on OSHA violations, they don't respond to Macris 19 corrects that right-to-work laws do not lead to increased labor law violations, and they don't have any specific empirical evidence on this, whereas we do. Moving on to our case, they try to tell you that money is coming directly out of workers' pockets, but in the source itself, Kim 18, it defines that reduced labor costs are coming from preventing unionization, transport and trade costs, as well as the cost of natural resources, not just labor costs. They also try to give you this example of one company with Toyota not investing. This is just one company, whereas we give you evidence over the broad scope that states that 50% of manufacturers rule out non-right-to-work states. They try to tell you that our link lies in decreasing worker wages, but we show you that with right-to-work, unions are more responsive to workers, which decreases unpredictable behavior. This leads to a more stable environment in which workers and manufacturers can thrive together. Look to the multiplier effect, but Starkey 22 found that every manufacturing job spurs 7 to 12 new jobs in other related industries. Again, the empirics don't lie. I prefer Austin and Lilly here because it's a border county meta-analysis, meaning that eliminates any extraneous factors compared to their general evidence. Right to work reduces the share of individuals below the federal poverty line by 1.4% percentage points, with a 2.3% reduction in childhood poverty, prefer the middle class because they're the foundation of the economy and the largest class, and due to all these reasons, we urge a neg ballot.
After the summaries, we've now gotten a very clear picture of where each team is going to be going following the next cross-examination. On the affirmative side, they're making a very strong argument once again to the quality of life and the wellness of workers. We see lots of important social studies standards being met in the way that they're debating. For instance, lots of economic analysis and evidentiary support in terms of the wages of workers in areas that don't have strong unions. We're also hearing some good evidence about worker productivity in the form of the evidence of 34% fewer violations in OSHA inspections in states with strong labor unions. To me, I think that what the affirmative side is going for is best summed up in the rhetoric that the debater uses at the end of the summary, that there is a false promise of benefits. Meanwhile, we see another important social studies standard being embedded within the negatives approach, and it's all about causality and causal analysis. Once again, the negative is trying to establish that right-to-work laws don't cause a decrease in labor unions or labor union memberships. In fact, they're establishing that the converse is true, that right-to-work laws can create stronger union membership, stronger labor unions, and they also cite some evidence that say that in right-to-work states, there's an increase in union wages by 5%. In the next speeches that we hear, both sides will have to go through and establish which position has more strength. But first, our next speech is the last cross-examination of the round. In this cross-examination, called the Grand Crossfire, all four debaters will be questioning and asking each other questions and answers at the same exact time. Rather than just two, there are four that will be debating with each other at the same time. Because of this, all four debaters will need to make sure that they can coordinate their efforts to maximize the most time they can get out of this cross-examination.
Everybody ready for Brand?
Yep, we're good.
Are you okay if we get the first question?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll start the 3-minute timer in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so you mentioned in summary, did you say that labor cost, part of that was directly attributed to these companies pouring money into preventing unionization?
Okay, so I think you're misunderstanding our point here. So in the source that we read about creating more business-friendly climate, it's KIM 18, right? And in that source itself, it defines that the reduced labor costs are coming from preventing unionization, transport and trade costs, as well as the cost of natural resources, not just labor costs like you're saying.
Mm-hmm. So, but it does say that they're directing money into preventing unionization.
Yeah, and that falls with right to work because of the fact that with right to work, it incentivizes unions to be better and stop aggressive policies such as strikes, which hurt workers and companies. So when unions don't make these rash decisions, companies don't have to spend money on going against them because unions and manufacturers can actually work in harmony with right to work.
Can I get a quick follow-up really?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, so why are companies pouring money into preventing unionization?
Because of the fact that they do these aggressive policies that are unpredictable.
Okay. Do you have a question?
Yeah. So, can you explain how, just sort of going back to the same point, you talked about how this money is like coming from exploiting workers. So can you explain more about that? Because we show you how, like, by implementing right to work policy, it's going to lead to an environment in which workers and manufacturers can work together, which isn't happening in the status quo in non-right to work states right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, working together is really the entire goal of unions. The goal of unions is to provide a way for workers and the workplace as a whole to communicate with their boss on an equal playing field. So that's really the goal of unions in the first place. But what we're seeing here with the exploitation is the fact that, like my partner and I stated, labor costs are a primary attributor to labor costs are the wage and benefits paid to workers. And so if companies are directly being drawn here because of this decreased labor cost, which again is part of that, then they're coming here because they know they don't have to pay their workers as much. That's where the exploitation comes in.
Okay, can I have a follow-up to that? But we talk about how the reason for these lower wages and how, like you were talking about, how right to work workers earn 83% of what non-right to work workers say. The reason for that is because of a lower cost of living. It's not just because companies are paying their workers less. That's not the sole reason. Like, you can't just say that that's the only reason why there's lower wages.
But if that's the case, then manufacturers aren't solely going there for the right to work laws. They could very well be going there because there's that less cost of living. They don't have to pay their workers as much under that very same logic.
Yeah, but you can't say that that wages decrease specifically just because of right to work laws?
Like, manufacturers are going to these states for stability. They're not going there so that they can pay workers less or so that they can exploit their rights. They're going there for stability.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, how are right to work laws helping the middle class when workers in these right to work states make less money, have less benefits, and experience more dangerous working conditions?
So we tell you that all of those things actually aren't true. It's not more dangerous, and they actually make 5% more money in right to work states.
Okay.
The final segment of this debate round are the two final focus speeches. They are by far the shortest speeches in the round, and it's the last shot effort that each debate team will have to give an advocacy for their position. Like the summary, they should not be going line by line and attacking every single argument in the round. Rather, the job of this speech is to focus on the most important, crucial issues that have been exposed from the summary and the grand crossfire in order to establish a ballot for the judge. In essence, they should use this speech to tell the judge exactly how they're voting. One of the most important jobs of this speech is impact analysis, not just establishing why their arguments are true, but why their arguments actually matter. So, why should a judge vote for their position? They will need to use elements of persuasion as well as clarity in this speech in order to help the judge write that ballot.
For a brief off-time roadmap, I'll be addressing the framework for today's round, and then I'm going to be going down, really just summarizing the primary voters of today's debate and why we win under the winning mechanism of quality of life. So I'm going to be starting my 2-minute timer here in 3, 2, 1. For the framework of today's debate, it must be weighed upon quality of life, because that's of the workers, because that's who right to work laws are designed to hurt, on balance. And we'll agree to my opponent's definition of right to work laws, because their own definition states that it's designed to allow people not to join unions. It's designed to hurt the unionization rates and hurt unions as a whole. The unions that provide the benefits that my partner and I have stated throughout this entire debate. So let's begin by boiling down their primary impacts, where they talk about the manufacturing industry and how it spurs economic growth. We can see that the only reason manufacturers really want to go here is because of the decreased labor costs, like my opponent stated in case. They don't deny the fact that these decreased labor costs include workers' benefits and pay, meaning that manufacturers are merely seeking to exploit the vulnerable workers that aren't being protected by unions nearly as much. They try to deny this by attacking the fact that maybe unionization rates don't go down like we're trying to propose. However, the National Bureau of Economic Research states that what they're trying to attack, the statistic, is merely the second study done to support the already existing data, this worker-level data that is trustable. But even if you don't believe that, let's look at the empirics, like my opponent stated. Kentucky, in the year that they passed right to work laws, had a decrease by nearly 2% in their unionization rates, and that has continued, dropping to 7.9 in 2022, an astounding difference from the national average. So we can see that it is decreasing a significantly higher amount than the status quo like they're trying to sell you on. So we can see that this effect on right to work, or the effects of right to work laws and unionization are having detrimental effects. We see this with decreased worker safety, the 14.2 increase in occupational mortality, which they don't defend or attack at all. It flows cleanly through, you weigh on quality of life. Because ultimately, right to work law is the sheep's clothing that hides the wolf of worker exploitation. Thank you.
Is everybody ready? Okay, then time is going to start on my first word. Judge, in today's round, we strongly negate. In terms of framework, the middle class is the backbone of our economy. When the middle class has access to good jobs, it creates a multiplier effect that benefits everyone, including businesses, unions, and lower-income families. Therefore, you should mark your ballot for the team that provides the best impact on the middle class. When we look at the opponent's case, there's really no true impact that you can vote for. They tell you that right to work hurts unionization, but their minimal evidence ignores other factors. It's correlation, not causation. They cannot prove that right to work is the root cause of deunionization, but rather we show you that right to work actually helps unions as decertification positions go down by 38%. They never respond to this. The empirical evidence doesn't lie. Macrodis 19 found that right to work doesn't increase labor law violations. Austin and Lilly find that there's no difference in health insurance coverage. The ACT even admits in their final focus that they only give you state-by-state empirics and that their impacts come from unionization, which we prove isn't harmed. Instead, Austin and Lilly tell you that right to work reduces unemployment by 0.4% and reduces poverty by 1.4%. Prefer our evidence because it eliminates all other factors besides right to work, which the opponents fail to do. Because of this, look to the two ways that the neg helps the middle class the most. First, the multiplier effect. They keep telling you that manufacturing increases from exploitation, but judge, manufacturers prefer the stability of right to work because unions and companies can thrive together. So they actually pay these workers more, leading to an increased investment. They drop Chun 21, who tells you that there's actually a 5% increase in wages because of right to work. Because of this, you should vote on Discourse 22, who found that every manufacturing job spurs 7 to 12 new jobs. Second, rural. Because of increased manufacturing, Aldrich 97 finds that right to work increases rural earnings by 5.2%. Revitalizing rural economies helps thousands of Americans long term. The act tries to tell you that they advocate for the average American, but right to work has no impact on insurance or fatalities, but what it does do is it creates jobs. It creates jobs with higher wages because unemployment drops by 0.4% and poverty drops by 1.4%. Don't fall for the facade that the act creates. Vote for the evidence and vote neg.
With the conclusion of the final focus speeches, this debate round is now over, and it's up to a judge to decide who they believed was the most persuasive based on argumentation and evidence used throughout the round. In the final focuses, both teams again do a masterful job of using a thesis-driven approach to try to support their position. The negative side maintains the argument that right-to-work laws are better for the middle class, because there's a benefit to everyone, because there's a multiplier effect that will increase wages for all, and because they still have concern that the affirmative has not proved a causal link between right-to-work laws and decreased union membership. Meanwhile, the affirmative once again sticks to their overwhelming idea of the quality of life for workers, and the idea that right-to-work laws only help others through exploitation of those workers and false promises. At this point, the judge needs to wade through the data and the analysis to determine a winner. I think that this round overall showcases one of the best parts about debate and how it is so helpful for use in the social studies classroom. We have witnessed now conflicting discourse done in a respectful and mature way by who we expect to be the future citizenry of our population that's able to handle complex and important issues. The round was done in an intellectually sharp, yet also emotionally mature way, even though everyone was dealing with real-world issues. To me, this is the benefit of speech and debate, as well as the National Speech and Debate Association as a whole. Thank you for watching this public forum round.